Yes, found it. Found it.
Okay. My gosh. That's not what I wanted. What is going
Right.
on? Dear, oh dear. Oh, that's very large. Can I do that? Can do this. Can do this. Okay. All right. We are live. I think
Live, live.
we are live.
Live, live. We are live, live. With 2 minutes to go. I found a thing that I want to talk about.
Cool.
Or a thing that I saw this week.
Excellent. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about this week, and a surprise guest, as opposed to an impromptu guest. We got to figure out how we're doing the random punch outs.
It's called A Challenger Emerges.
Okay, there we go. All right, should we post that we're going live?
Yeah. I have done the thing. I've done the thing on my account.
Okay. Should we do it on the main account?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you do
you
that.
Doing it? You do it.
No,
I'll
yeah,
do it.
You do it.
I'll do it. Okay, I did it.
All right. All right. Oh, wait. Yeah, this is my notifications, not anybody else's notifications. I'm also like totally giving away the plot. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Okay, they're going to receive buffer. People will have to buffer. Nah, what are we going to do? Oh my god. Come on. Oh gosh, everything.
Buffering. It's like Real Player all over again.
I know, man. We shouldn't have left the modem era, should we have?
No, it would have solved the people uploading shit video problem.
Here, everybody can look at Hacker News while I log in here. I should, again, need to vamp. Need better things to vamp with. Okay, there we go. All right, so we are live now. And I will also repost from my account. What's going on, Dan? How are you?
It's Friday. I can't believe it's Friday. I'm going to a Ren fair tomorrow, which is amusing as someone from England because it's like, oh, this is so cute. You're pretending.
Yeah.
You're pretending that you have the history.
Yeah.
You don't actually have the history.
We have a long history of pretending that we have history, though.
You do, yes, yes. It's almost as if you are, and right now trying to reenact it. And some people going back to, well, what if we had a king? That's certainly a thing.
Yeah.
Ainsley.
Why?
No, I did see a thing that I'm interested in Blue Sky this week. At least one thing, because we need to have a thing for our running order. But you also had a thing. My thing is I'm drafting off your thing.
Your thing is you're drafting off my thing. Okay, well, 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me make sure that our guest has a Zoom link for later. Okay.
You're spoiling the surprise.
Oh yeah, I guess it. Well, no, I've already said that we've got a guest that's coming later. And okay, yeah, we got that. Now let me go find Oh my God, we actually have like materials and things like that. So here we go. Um, yeah. So, well, first off, we should say like I'm hanging out here in sweaty southwestern Ontario for a couple of weeks. Still here. Still going to be here for a little while. And it's been nice experiencing thunderstorms because I mean, like I grew up out
Mm.
this way, so it's been nice to experience summer the way that I remember summer. Roughly speaking, given the fact that our climate is continuing to change and our children are going to experience things
I was
that we
going to
never
ask
experienced.
how much is on fire and how much smoke is outside. Are you smoky this season so far?
No, in California, actually, the Bay Area is experiencing the coldest winter in years and years and years, which has been like really pleasant, except for like right now where it's like actually kind of cold, and we're thankfully here
Got to
experiencing much
break out
warmer
all
weather.
those. Got to break out all those Patagonia vests.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I've got puffer jackets are one of my go-tos. Oh, let me turn that off.
Oh, you
Um,
had the thing on.
yep, we can.
There you go.
Oh, I guess it didn't show on the stream. All right, fine. Uh, the let's see. What's the thing on it? Oh, yeah, there we go. On um, yep. And the tie-in and related thing was I saw that the National Weather Service actually joined Blue Sky as an experiment. And oh, I should actually pull that up, shouldn't I? The National Weather Service, and this is like related to a couple of different things, which is like um, what kind of how does government interface with um, what sort of services should and does the government provide? How do they communicate with the public? And especially now that all of the, we all live online basically, right? And the National Weather Service, I think, is one of those really useful and interesting examples um, of um, services that are um, public services. People are aware that it exists, but don't really know what it does, and largely they interface with weather reports through television stations, like whether that's local or like the Weather Channel, right? And so they're companies or apps, right? And all of those companies are downstream of this public resource that the National Weather Service produces, and uh, they also people don't really know because of that. People are like really disconnected from both how the National Weather Service is set up and what it kind of does. Right? They put out these weather bulletins, but they're actually set up as regional offices and they interact with a whole lot of different things, right? We're talking agriculture, we're talking air traffic control, we're talking like a whole bunch of different ways that this is a public good that enables a lot of other industries and enables us to be able to plan better as individuals, as consumers, all those sorts of things, right? And the National Weather Service has been sort of a big topic over the summer too because of some major disasters that have happened. And it's like the National Weather Service is one of those things that's become increasingly more important as the climate changes and as we invalidate the assumptions that a lot of our infrastructure was built with. And so our ability to access and understand this information and get timely information is like really critical. And it's weird to see these services try and figure out how to connect and engage with the public through platforms that kind of don't think of themselves or haven't put themselves as public infrastructure. And so, National Weather Service has a presence in a bunch of these places, but they really think about and optimize for how they can reach people who are going to be affected by storms and particularly dramatic weather. And some of this I learned through talking with the National Weather Service. This is part of what the outreach that we did with Mozilla Social. And one of the gnarly parts is like this is like not. I would not say that the National Weather Service itself is like unified on what the best ways to reach out to people are, or what their role even is in communicating this stuff. So the Bay Area National Weather Service on Twitter was great. They were amazing. They gave really timely updates. They engaged with people, but that was basically a bunch of people who were weather nerds who worked for the National Weather Service who had a passion for doing this. Right. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. Hmm.
So I think there's this tension between what's an emergency alert and what's an informational alert, right? And when you're allowed to, or when, from a policy point of view, you would be allowed to usurp or break into a communications platform and be able to insert something there. Because we've got something similar with Amber alerts, right, where the infrastructure for that is at the OS level, um, on mobile phones, right? And I think earthquake alerts as well. So there are ways for governments, local governments, law enforcement agencies to tap into mass notification platforms, which mean you can bypass, you don't have to be on Twitter, you don't have to be on Blue Sky, all right? You don't have to even be on Facebook. And then you can, at the um, at the extreme end, you can use those platforms. So there's that, I think, as um, publishing has been democratized, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, all the way right through to microblogging, you know, you don't have to just do the forum, and the outlets aren't just terse emergency messages. You can also do informational stuff. You can send more than just your, well, this is a emergency platform. We should only be using it, very, very infrequently. Apart from if you're in one, I think it's in Texas or in Austin, where the police department has a habit of using it. They use it whenever one of their police officers is in danger, and they sent one at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And a whole bunch of local residents were like, I feel sorry for you, but you did wake me up very, very loudly at 3 in the morning to let me know that one of your officers was in danger, and we should look out for someone. So there's there's this continuum, right? Because we've got the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They're on Blue Sky. They were really great posters on Twitter. They're really great posters on, and if you're looking at their job from the point of view of getting enough information out there about recalls, I think with Mastodon, the argument was it's kind of like be on as many platforms as possible so that there are more chances of people seeing your message. And this was why, and I think, with the takeover of Twitter and then more government understanding of ranking algorithms and recommendation algorithms, it's like, well, we can't rely on Twitter or Facebook to put our stuff out there. We can't inject anything into the stream that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right, on a couple of dimensions, which is both what is we live in a really weird era in terms of what the nature of public comms is between elected
Right.
officials, government, and public services. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's like a couple of things that are like sliding around in terms of like what are the obligations that these platforms have to communicate to people, especially in the case of emergencies. Um,
Right.
what are the obligations that our government has to communicate with us?
Yep.
And what is, I mean, like we're starting to see things like alternative services crop up where there is some sort of service failure rates. Like there are apps that are specifically about trying to help people notify around fires in California, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
Um,
Earthquake alert. There's earthquake alerts in California as well.
yeah,
Specific service for that.
yeah, but I mean, like the and all of those interface with various different public service providers in different types of ways, which is why it's like I'm really happy to see the National Weather Service experimenting here, and it's going to be interesting too on like what is it going to take for them to continue posting on this, and so I've got up on
They're not posting. Like I just went to their account and it's empty now.
not yet. Right, but you can read up like they have written up, and in particular, there's a dude Corey who
Yeah.
focuses on social media for the National Weather Service has written up
Right.
essentially what
Okay.
amounts to an experiment,
Okay.
and you can I dropped it into the chat on Streamplace, and it gives the parameters for what type of experiment they're doing and how long they're going to do it for. And I hope that they're going to be able to continue doing that. That's cool. The other thing that I think is interesting about this is like almost certainly the National Weather Service is getting on here and going to experiment with this as if it were just microblogging on Twitter. And they've
Yes.
got a general account, and we'll have to
Yeah.
see what kind of that means. Since I'm used to interacting with the Bay Area NWS, who were great, and provided regional information. But like the thing that's fascinating to me is like at Proto provides an opportunity to do a whole lot more than just like, hey, you can microblog to some people.
Right.
Which is not what's going on here. But the interesting part also is that they have a form set up for like if you have suggestions or things that you want to do, you can contact them and talk about it too.
Yes. Which is so we did see some of this. So some of the other examples of this we saw before were the BBC did a really good write-up of its experiment on Mastodon
Mm.
or its ActivityPub experiment and what they were trying to do, what they were trying to get out of it, and also when they would know to shut it down. Um, so they also, I think the Beeb also made clear because it was their R&D department, which traditionally has been very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they make clear this is what we're trying to figure out, and it's just going to end at this date. Which I think, if you've ever run one of these things, is one of the smartest things to do because then you can
Yeah.
say, right, at least we've got an end date on the resources
Yeah.
that we need to do with this, and it helps. It means that can get more easily approved by exec leadership because then they're not left with the feeling that something's going to be hanging around and need to be supported for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but
So
so
keep
this,
an eye on that. Yeah.
yeah, and it kind of so it's like the easy answer is, and there are so many ways that you can think about doing this. So there are things like, yes, a police department could certainly have an account on Blue Sky. What it would use it for and what it's useful for, especially in comparison with other platforms, right? And so I'm using Blue Sky as an example here. So for example, like so one of the things that we saw in one of the flooding tragedies that happened, I think maybe in Florida, or it's happened multiple times now, right? So a police department will post on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and then because there are a lot of people on Facebook, then a discussion will come up in the comments, and the PD will respond to it, and they'll also get a whole bunch of new information that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Like they're getting stuff like, okay, right, we know there's someone here. Like you can tell us that there's someone here, and then now we're going to route our emergency team so they go pick up in a different order. And that is not like that's this space where it's a conversation. It benefits from exposure to as many people as possible, right? And being able to spread. And that is one thing that you would assume that you would kind of intuitively understand that Facebook is good at because it knows where you are, even if you're not following the PD
Yeah.
page, right? You're probably still like there is a chance that you'll still see it in your feed
Yeah.
because it will get recommended in there. So all of this, governments shouldn't like they shouldn't rely on platforms. Like, yes, that's true, but it's also there are some intrinsic there are some exclusive benefits to platforms that aren't replicable elsewhere, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's interesting and complicated in a couple of ways, and including the fact that, implicit in some of the things that we're talking about is the fact that like Blue Sky actually doesn't have a good sense of locality, and place.
No. Yeah.
And so like that's kind of, I think, one of the challenges that I've got with the platform, and I think to the platform's detriment, because I don't think that Blue Sky is going to be able to eat the world all at the same time, right? It's a boiling the ocean problem. And to me, especially given some of Blue Sky's like the 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 user base is I would say left leaning by and large. And like if you're gonna do that, one of
Right.
the things that would be ideal to do would be target particular municipalities and be able to drive features around that. So like I want to drive more Bay Area usage of Blue Sky. I think it would be a
Yep.
better alternative than staying on X for different things. But
Yep.
like literally
Yeah.
all of the fire departments are on X and post to X. Not very
Yep.
well, but that's where they post, right? And they do a little bit
Right.
of posting to Facebook. And to me, I'm like, hey, why not try and make an intentional effort to capture and a particular region and grow from there. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about. And so, the NWS experiment I think is kind of weird in this way too, which is like they're going for that like general resource usage as opposed to a targeted thing,
Right.
which is kind of a bummer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
But
Patrick.
then you, oh, Patrick. What's Patrick saying?
Blue Sky's leftist. I mean, we're here in the containment dome, right? So
And this is one of the things that we've been talking about since the beginning of the podcast, which is that we're really more about AT Proto. Blue Sky is the Twitter-like skeuomorph that has been built on top of that. Um, and the potential are all of the applications that can be built on AT Proto.
yeah,
So one thing that this allows you is that you can provide a feed. A third party could provide a localized feed. Um, right. You could add your location information to your account that would be public to anyone. And there's nothing stopping something from looking at the fire hose and then filtering based on geography and then doing a recommender or producing a feed based on geography. Blue Sky, the PBC, doesn't have to do that. Like, that's not our only choice, right?
yeah, that's right. And I mean, there's been a bunch of interesting developments on some of those fronts, right? So on the at Proto Community Fund side of things, we actually are incubating a geography related, geo related
Mm-hmm.
project. So the at Geo,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some movement there, and people are thinking about setting up a gazetteer using the Foursquare data. So that's super
Yep.
interesting. But we've also got projects like Smoke Signal, which just hit its 1 year mark, and there's a tech talk yesterday about that. And a lot of the efforts there are going to be, I mean, like it's about events, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things that's really exciting to me is adoption of that and thinking of that as sort of shared infrastructure and resources for people who want to post events or want to curate lists of events and things like that. Which can start to get to more of that sense of place and trying to bind things together. And then I think about how does that show up in the places that people are currently using at Proto, which is these feeds that nobody or don't have that sense of place. But I think that you're absolutely right that we could start to build more of those, and uh, platforms like Graze.social allow you to
Yeah.
customize feeds.
Yeah.
But there's not quite that same feedback mechanism yet, which I think is
Right.
one of those things to keep on moving along.
Right.
Yeah. Um, we have about 10 minutes left. Which things do you want to hit? Do you want to follow up from last week, or what things have been on your mind too?
One short thing that has been on my mind is that Haley is running a synth account. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not. Oh,
Penelope?
yes, yeah, I did see Penelope. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I understand this right, Penelope is an LLM powered account
Hmm.
um, that is essentially running on its own and um, and gets to reply to people. Um, and it's been posting stuff, interesting stuff like, if I were gonna try and lobby for a $100 allowance, right, then how might I do that? That was one of the posts that caught my attention. And the thing that is interesting there And I fully admit that I am nowhere near into all of the AI personality stuff.
Mhm.
Like I have hardly any interaction with it. I don't use it. All like the stuff that I read are the potentially alarmist yet also alarmingly true um, news reporting about people who get sucked in by some of these AI characters on different platforms, just like ChatGPT or wherever.
Mhm.
Um, but one thing that struck me interesting about what Haley is talking about it is just the usage of the word synth
Mhm.
to distinguish this as different from something like a bot. Like it's really smart to use a different word,
Mhm.
right? It's not a bot account. It's not a chat bot. Um, Haley's using the term synth, which means that you get to kind of define it a little bit more. So I am and create a different kind of space for it. And actually, one of the things that's been interesting to me is that I have not seen it being railroaded out of the Blue Sky ecosystem, like some other generative AI stuff. I think that there's if we're in the left leaning containment dome, um, it wouldn't have been unlikely um, for this account to be jumped on, and the kind of like how dare you put an LLM um, chatbot onto this platform and then not like try and make it a big deal, but for it to exist as a thing.
I think that there have been a couple of ways that that's been set up, right? And like broadly speaking, I agree, right? I think that there's a couple of different bots. And so Void was the first one that I saw,
Yes.
Void.comind.network. And
Yep.
Cameron came to speak at Atmosphere Conf about Void and
Yep.
where he was kind of headed with it, and since has been employed by the platform that Void is built from. And it's been interesting to me to see these bots as um, uh, as let's see, how would I put it, as co-creations, right, with the community, as opposed to the interaction loop
Yes.
around things like ChatGPT or Gemini, which is like
Yep.
very explicitly one-on-one, not a shared experience. Um,
Right.
and I know that Claude actually has like a groupware type of thing, but I haven't actually seen
Yeah.
what interacting there looks like in great detail. And so, uh, and yeah, I mean, Void did get some pushback, and I think that there's a variety of different ways that people have interacted. But it's not just like there was a Gemini account and I got put on a block list straight up as soon as it was
Right.
created because I was following it,
Right.
right? Which I think was very funny to see. Also, since it was like a Gemini fan account, it wasn't actually Gemini. But even seeing these dynamics within Blue Sky has been interesting to me because it feels more like the things that we think about when we think about bots in science fiction. Even though like
Yes. Yeah.
pushing on them is really goofy. Like I asked Void this past week about if it was on MySpace, who its top eight would be,
Right.
and got a bunch of pushback with that. And I think some of that's fun and funny to push the bots and see where they go, since these are LLMs, right? It's not like this is
Yeah.
a thing with an identity. But like Letta and where Cameron's been pushing it feels much more like an embodied agent than the
Yes.
I'm always going to appease you no matter what sort of vibe that
Right.
ChatGPT and Claude have.
Yeah. They definitely feel like they've both been set up in that place. They definitely feel like they are not transactional and informational. They don't I didn't feel like it was trying to trick you, and they don't appear to be, so it's not like something like Microsoft's Taylor, right? Where it's like, oh, here's the thing that you can ask questions,
Yeah.
right? It's not essentially a servant, and it's not transactional, and they don't appear to be, or they don't present as exploitative, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, Void is kind of complicated because of the fact that you can make requests to Void, and people have actually started getting Void to write blog posts on Whitewind.
Yeah.
And so that's been a little bit weird, and sort of seeing the social dynamics around that, because Void very explicitly has a queue of things that it
Yes.
tries to manage. Um,
Yeah. So that was the interesting thing that I saw. I thought it was an interesting social dynamic and behavior
yeah,
going on there.
yeah, that stuff is definitely a lot of fun. And let's see. Um,
You getting the
oh,
guest ready?
I've got a.
Oh,
Yes, our guest is gonna show up in a few minutes. I did want to mention one other thing was a follow up from last week, and oh, that was not what I wanted to link. So everybody got a quick review of who. Um, One follow up from last week was Ben Wordmuller, who's been running a series of like if I ran XYZ, posted an if I ran NPR and PBS. Since the government, the GOP government and Donald Trump rescinded all of NPR and PBS's
yep.
funding, which is going to be a huge issue for them. He ended up posting a like if I ran NPR and PBS series, and I'm like, all right, now do the late show. And
Yeah.
that sort of followed up on a bunch of the conversation that we had around. Um, oh, where'd the rest of the conversation go? We ended up talking a bunch about this around
We did.
where the my gosh, I'm just like not succeeding at using technology today. Um, the uh,
Oh, are you looking at transcript?
Am I looking at transcript? No, I'm not looking at
Yeah.
transcript yet, although I do have transcript. Let me try and find this post because I thought this was relevant and interesting to our purposes. Um,
Because we were, so while you do that, we were talking about the creator economy
yeah,
last week. Around that time, Colbert had just got, really, it was that long ago. Um, I think we just found out that Colbert's show had been cancelled,
yeah,
and we don't need to talk about why. Everyone knows why. And we were talking about what that means. I think it was like, how does something like that get created? You were drawing the analogy to something like Dropout,
yeah,
which has become like the platform for if you are into, I would say, you know, LA-based improv comedy, which Dropout as the company has figured out how to do, repeatedly. They've kind of productized it into their
yeah,
shows. They've got their formats and everything. They figured out how to do them cheaply. They run the company really, really well, really, really responsibly, as far as anyone can tell from the outside. Um, so there was a whole thing about, okay, well, if, for example, the late show and late night shows are a dying format, which people seem to be talking about, Colbert, I think, only gets something like 3 million viewers. And we were talking about, well, where else does that show up? Do even more people encounter Colbert or interact with the show, through something like YouTube, and then
yeah,
CBS gets to make money off YouTube ads that way? It was kind of like, well, what's the route for that? Does, for example, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the Colbert Show, do they just take everything lock, stock, and barrel and then move it over to Apple TV when they
yeah,
dump a truck of money in front of it? Or what else? What is the other thing if you're transitioning at the top end?
yeah,
And what might potential routes be if you're coming up from, the bottom end? If this is the beginning, and then sometime in 10 years' time, right, uh, there's your equivalent of, a big cultural moment type show.
yeah.
Well, I remember one of the replies that I got was like, if someone funded a drill TV show, I would watch that. A drill sketch show, I would watch that.
And this is kind of one of the crazy parts about some of this, which is like ultimately what's the economy that's funding this, and
Exactly.
what Ed posted, dude,
Ben.
who sorry, not Ben. There's another dude, Ed,
Oh, okay.
that I was posting
Yeah.
about who was just talking about like are ads essentially a zero, or was this business model a sort of zero interest rate phenomenon with ads for different types of streaming, right? And it's
Right.
interesting to think about ultimately what's the piece of the economy that is served by a show like Colbert's or any kind of creators who are trying
Yeah.
to own this. Again, it's one of the goofy parts about some of this conversation. So, wait, a
We have a
challenger
guest.
appears.
A challenger appears.
Let me reorganize how this is going to work. Hello to our challenger. And let me how this is going to work.
Did
Oh,
not sign
hello
up
to our challenger.
my last name does not fit the brief. I'm only, I feel like a special guest feels more appropriate than challenger. But
I
hello,
I feel
Hello.
like I feel like your surname could be the name of a fictional medieval weapon.
and Albert. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess that seems plausible.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Let
yeah.
me
Seems like something
recompose a
heavy
little
that
bit.
you would swing around and would cause at least some bludgeoning damage. It feels more like bludgeoning
Yeah. Yeah.
than spiky damage. Spiky.
I
Okay,
think that's
so
right. Although I now want to try to figure out why that feels true, or like what are the characteristics to a word that makes it sound more like it has bludgeoning
Right,
damage.
right. This is a Kiki Booba situation.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So first question, Kendra, Dan, have you ever met before?
I think we maybe met at XOXO very
Oh,
Oh
briefly.
yeah.
yeah,
That
okay,
is
yeah, that's right.
probably likely. Yeah.
Cool.
There's
Um,
probably a high likelihood we've been within 100 meters of each other.
Yes,
I,
that
I,
seems
Yeah.
true.
you two definitely met at the last XOXO since I was hanging out with both of you there. Kendra, I should introduce you first, or would you like to? No, I'm going to introduce you. Sorry. Kendra's a lawyer who I've known for a long time, and I guess I like to describe Kendra as a video game lawyer, somewhat to their chagrin, which also is very funny because it's true, but also hides a lot of the depth of the other things that they do. Because I first started talking to Kendra about FOIA, let's see, data journalism FOIA cases in the Ninth Circuit, and getting a bunch of data journalists to sign on to get actual data from the government, which was cool. And then Kendra has also done quite a lot of First Amendment uh, casework and worked at the Harvard Cyber Law Clinic for a number of
Hmm.
years, and also wrote this amazing thing earlier this year, which was, I'm just going to read it out loud. Statement from Albert Sellers LLP on Trump's executive order, quote, preventing abuses of the legal system and federal court, end quote. Fuck that fascist nonsense, which is an excellent press release. And also, I think, met the moment in terms of standing up for the legal profession in a way that a number of white shoe law firms were not doing and have been soundly
Yeah.
derided by everybody in the industry. So, way to stand up where other people did not have the courage.
We're not doing is doing a lot of work there, and I would say is a very large understatement
Yeah,
to the position that
Yeah.
they ended up taking.
yeah.
Yes,
Um,
that is fair. Um,
and I wanted to bother a video game lawyer a little bit, particularly this week. An internet lawyer who understands, or sorry, a video game lawyer who understands the internet, because of a bunch of things that happened this week, whether that was HIO and
Yep.
some of the campaigns around that. And I mean, things are changing for Blue Sky as well in terms of the age restriction regulations that have gone into effect in the UK. And while not so much about the details, but it's interesting to talk about the dynamics around what does it mean to interact with these organizations and what does it mean to use them and the dynamics around some of those pieces as well. So, hi, Kendra.
Hi. Well, I'm glad to be here. Excited to chat. And I think, the as someone who's sort of a bit of a generalist, I've worked on little bit of everything, but in
Hmm.
particular, the itch.io stuff is interesting to me, not just because of the video game work, but I've worked pretty extensively on sexual, moderation of sexual content by
Hmm.
payment card processors and
Yeah.
payment card companies.
Ah.
Um, so I have a lot of opinions on that, and which I think Ted had heard me complain about. So that might be part of the motivation for asking me to come chat today. But yeah, happy to dive in with whatever y'all
Yeah.
wanna talk about.
Yeah. And because, I mean, some of this stuff is, this is like, this particular moment is not the first time this has happened. This is like the confluence of a bunch of things. And I think that some of the takes on this are right. And that, like, hey, Itch, you knew that this was coming eventually. Like,
This was inevitable. We've known this ever since, there's only how many payment processors that adult content or sexual content sites on the internet can use or
yeah,
anywhere can use, right? Because we're also down to the Visa Mastercard duopoly on, what do those payment processors feel like they want to process or not.
yeah. I
And this
mean,
is America, so that's a free speech issue.
well,
Well, fun times.
yeah. I mean,
So I think it's. Go ahead, Ted.
I mean, and some of this is basically hidden infrastructure, a conversation about hidden infrastructure, fundamentally.
Exactly. And I think it's actually maybe if we're talking about the hidden infrastructure, worth distinguishing. And I don't always do this well, but it's worth doing because I think it's important, distinguishing between like the payment card companies like Visa and MasterCard and payment
Yes.
card processors, which are usually actually like Stripe is a good example of a payment card processor, but there are other ones. And usually, like, part of what happens, like, there's sort of this, Dan, is like you're alluding to, right? There's this segmenting in the industry where processors that are willing to work with sexually explicit content, or like work with sites that have sexually explicit content,
Mhm.
they charge far higher fees. Frankly,
Right.
the user experience is way sketchier. Like, there's lots
Right.
of reasons people don't want to use those processors.
Right.
If you've ever paid for a porn website, like that's not sort of OnlyFans or one of the major companies, like you'll know that you get sent to these like weird, like you're like, is this real? Like, am I
You're like,
supposed to be typing my
is
credit card
is
information in
is
here?
this
Right? Like,
1996 all over again? Because it kind of looks
exactly,
like
right?
1996 all over again.
Yeah. And so, part of what happens is, if you're a big enough site, then you may be dealing directly with the payment card companies. But for
Mhm.
smaller sites, you're often actually in a position where you're handling, you're actually working with processors. It's a little unclear to me exactly what's happening with Itch in that way, because they sort of announced that Visa and MasterCard had, what it sounds like, basically threatened to
Yeah.
pull services.
Yep.
I don't know if y'all want to do a like summary of what's happening there before we like dive into the hidden infrastructure part.
I think just I mean I think at least for the people who would be watching this, we can say Itch pulled the content, and they've said exactly what you said, and they can't operate without. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's not necessarily they are kind of screwed. They would have to make a massive change in how they run their company. So it was kind of either put up or just don't or just stop.
Yeah, and it happened to OnlyFans. I don't think it wasn't both payment card companies. I think it might have just been MasterCard, but don't quote me on that. A couple of years ago, basically same deal. Like, hey, we will no longer provide services to your company. And I think, yeah, it's an existential threat to
Right.
to the company existing, right? Like, so, it doesn't mean that, again, as y'all said at the top, right? Like, there weren't things that they could have done differently in the lead up to this to sort of have thought through like what the potential
Right.
consequences were. But like, if Visa or MasterCard are saying like, we're not going to provide services to your company, like, there is no, like, you are not in a position where you necessarily have a good other option other than, okay, what do you want us to take down, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
there's an interesting difference here between, so this is a choice that Visa and MasterCard are making, essentially like a terms of service choice, as opposed to something like if you are going to buy a marijuana product in California, or I think anywhere, right, you have to pay cash
Yeah, you can
because
sometimes get away
federally,
with like weird debit card stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, but the I mean, some of that, I actually don't know totally to what extent the marijuana stuff is, uh, uh, like, it's somewhere on the line between this is a legal requirement and this is a risk decision Visa and MasterCard are making. And I don't know exactly where that is.
yeah.
Maybe you do, right?
I think in the US it's because it doesn't have clearance federally. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's some combination of like interstate commerce or something where it's like, well, if this is completely illegal from a federal point of view, then states are okay to do it. States that have legalized it are okay to do it with cash because the cash only exists there and it's only moving within the state or something like that. Because I also know that the way that the stores have to clear in California is that they just go to the bank every day and then they just dump a
Yes.
shitload of cash. Like,
Yeah.
this is how we have to run
Yeah.
our business.
And like, I think what, I would be surprised if it was sort of like an interstate commerce thing. But I think
Right.
ultimately the point here is that, like, for so many of these particular product categories, right?
Mm,
Like, the it's often quite difficult to tell what the different, like, whether it's an actual legal risk thing, whether it's sort of a
right.
business risk thing, right? The
Right.
excuse you always hear in the payment processor context in the case of sexually explicit content is there are more chargebacks. Now,
Right.
I don't know. I have not seen research that talks about whether this is actually true, and it's not really, I think, possible to test in a meaningful way because of the discrimination in payment systems between like around
Right.
sexually explicit content, right? Like, so if I'm using this like sketchy ass payment processor that looks like it's out of 1995, then I'm maybe more likely to end up charging back because like, it feels like something like I'm not going to recognize what it is on my bill or whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So like you can't actually like we don't have the like, A/B test version of what chargebacks look like. But the point here is that it's always difficult to tell, from the outside of these companies, what is legal risk, what is sort of operational risk, and what is
Right.
just straight up puritanical bullshit, right?
Right.
Like, I'm assuming I can swear.
Yes.
Uh,
Wait,
um,
did you say reputation? Was reputational risk one of the ones that you?
I
Yeah.
mean, I think that I would put that under the same category as operational risk,
Understood.
but I think,
Right.
yeah, but yeah, that's another one too, right? Um, and that's what you saw with the sort of whatever that Australian company sat. It's what's the name of the actual Australian organization that like targeted itch and Steam?
Oh,
Um,
collective shout.
Collective Shout, right? Like that's it's the same thing that happened actually in the Visa and Mastercard. About 3 or 4 years ago, Mastercard unveiled entirely new regulations for sexually explicit content. And it included stuff like you can't have hypnosis porn. Like anyway, it was really wild. And deleting back content that contained all sorts of like theoretical, like potentially non-consensual stuff that was not even
Right.
close. Like, so the and that was also the result, as far as we can tell, of like investor activity or like outside advocacy. So like, I
Right.
think people have mentioned this
Activist.
before, but
Yeah.
it's what's happened to itch is not just like predictable in the sense of like, oh, like, payment processors and payment companies have huge leverage, but also like literally we've seen sort of these kinds of campaigns play out previously.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about leverage, but actually no, there was a change. Did Steam just make a change about how Steam dealt with adult content?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's same people basically were pushing all of this, and I mean some of the stuff is like interesting and funny, and thinking of like, okay, do Mastercard and Visa actually have a like rigid taxonomy of pornography, and like, which is
There is
Yes.
someone, there
right,
is someone
like,
at Visa or Mastercard who is, I'll know it when I see it.
well, I mean beyond
No,
that,
they're
right?
not.
Yeah,
So, okay. Like I can tell you about this if you want to hear about it
sure.
because I know about it. So actually, like what folks who work at porn companies have historically said is there's actually like basically an internal set of rules about what is acceptable and what isn't, and it's very specific. And actually, I can see if I can track down a link and send it, but there's a really incredible chart. I believe it's from a person called Sophie Ladder who basically went through each online service and looked at like what was allowed in like a level of granularity that this
Wow.
is quite sexually
This is
explicit, right?
amazing.
But yes, like there actually is, so I have this article that I published a couple of years ago where I sort of make this argument that because there's no enforcement on a federal level of obscenity law based for adult content, like content with consensual adults in it,
Yet.
that well, no, not even
Oh wait,
yet.
no.
There
So law.
was
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
was up until the Obama
Yeah.
administration. But the prosecutions haven't, the Justice Department hasn't prosecuted a case in that space in a while.
Hmm.
But basically, like what I argue in the article is that it's now a multinational standard, right? Payment companies are the ones who functionally control what kinds of sexually explicit content is allowed online, which like, you know, I don't want to be like, oh, I was right, but like, I mean, and I don't, and first, there's plenty of people who said it before me, including like lots of sex workers. This is what Free Speech Coalition has been talking about a lot, anyway. So,
I mean, you
but
get to be right
it's,
with all of them too.
yeah,
So
yeah, we're all right. We all said it and we're all right.
So
So,
this is a dumb question because we've been talking about hidden infrastructure, right?
yeah,
And we can talk about those payment platforms. We talk about them as payment platforms, right? And then now they are the reason why this is happening is because those platforms are sufficiently large that they are now multinational in scope, so that they have to take into account all of the different international jurisdictions in which they're operating, or they've decided to do that, and then um, So the dumb question is, do payment platforms count as very large online platforms
You mean like under the DSA?
under the
Um,
DSA?
I don't think so. Because I suspect, I mean, DSA is not my area of expertise. But I suspect the way the definitions are written have to do something
Right,
like with user generated content. Like that's
Yeah,
often
that's
kind
right.
of what you're looking at.
right, right.
Um,
I
but I
was
mean,
just
yeah,
talking with some lawyers about regulations around the DSA, and part of the key aspect of this is publishing information and disseminating it widely is one of the kind of key parts. So I would suspect that something like Visa and MasterCard, they're not disseminating information.
Because
But
if I
like
were
maybe
mean, I would
Venmo.
try to make that. If I were mean, I would try to make that argument.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think folks often when they this is the chart. It is it,
No,
you know it
me.
is. I sent it to y'all in chat. I don't know how you want to get it on stream or if you want to get it on stream. It is very much explicit. So like there's no
Yeah,
photos or anything, but
yeah.
um,
Give me 2 seconds and I'll pop it in.
Dun, dun,
but
dun.
This is just
yeah, but I mean,
publicly
I think
accessible. I can just link to this.
yeah,
Great.
yep, yep. It's not been updated in I think a little while, but you get the idea.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Okay.
um,
It
so
is. It is totally not a surprise that on the internet there was someone obsessive enough and
I mean,
was
Sophie Lauder
enough.
is actually a porn star, so she like
Okay.
I actually don't know their pronouns, but
Other much right,
like this is for the purposes of people who produce porn
right,
understanding what can go on what platform. Like that's
right.
why this document exists.
Huh. Amazing. I mean, like again, this is like a fantastic taxonomy.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
for
yeah.
providing
Um,
it.
So this is what you need to know if you want to do. But like an equivalent to this is what dimensions image, what dimension of an image do I need to post to any arbitrary social platform? Because they're all different.
exactly.
I need a list somewhere to be able to just do my shit, which is
Yeah.
probably doing my shit is probably also on that list.
Yeah, literally or
Yeah,
figuratively.
yeah, it literally is. And I'll also drop a link to the article that I talk about this in.
Yeah,
But
please.
yeah, but I think the point, your point, Dan, about like sort of this idea of like, okay, like these, you know, uh, are they regulated as very large online platforms, right? I think often, and it was true of me when I started working on this, like I was shocked at how like it's functionally, at least in the US, these payment processors, these payment card companies are not regulated in any way that is proportionate to the power that they have in the space. And a couple of years ago, the ACLU filed a complaint with the FTC, basically asking the FTC to investigate Mastercard for its sexually explicit content policy.
Uh-huh.
That didn't go anywhere,
Right.
but it was sort of an effort to try to say, hey, like they are using their market power in ways that are not 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 to the good of all. Let's go with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it is, I think, really striking because functionally why itch.io or whoever needs to comply with this is because credit cards are the de facto way that people pay each other in at least the US and
Right,
oftentimes in other jurisdictions.
Right.
And if that wasn't true, then these payment card companies would not have this kind of power.
So I'm just
yeah,
going to say it before anyone else does, which is this is why blockchain and Bitcoin people are excited.
Yeah.
And then we can
Yes.
just leave that to the side. We do not have to go anywhere near crypto.
well, no, I do think that the following thing is useful and important, right? Because, I mean, first off, there's so much money in crypto and that stuff's not going away. So these people are going to crop up and they're going to talk about a bunch of things. And there are even efforts to integrate wallet to wallet transactions alongside AT Proto, for example. And some of those things are neat. The problem is that there's a mass adoption problem there no matter what. And I've got problems and qualms with the way that the crypto economy is structured. But like, you're not going to get most people on board
That
there
could in the
as well,
US
which is
that could radically change by the end of the year in the environment that we're in right now.
I think there's still a user adoption problem fundamentally,
Yes. Yeah.
and that's the thing that we're not going to see overcome. Because I mean, like all of this stuff is out there, people can use it, and the way that it's regulated may change, but like still there's a user adoption problem. And the de facto thing is like everybody's bank accounts are hooked up to their credit cards, and that's how all of that stuff works. And that stuff's not going to change anytime
No.
and soon, as well as the fact that like some of this stuff is still scoped jurisdictionally, right? Like the interesting part about Mastercard and Visa is the fact that they are international companies imposing what is effectively a Western and I would argue American specific set of policy perspectives on global commerce.
Yes.
And like that's like interesting in a bunch of different ways and in like implicit exercise of American power. But then, you know, you've got a variety of different layers of this. And what's interesting to me about things like Ofcom's regulation around age and social platforms is like Blue
Yeah.
Sky's going to face similar problems and other social platforms. And I think people doing
Yeah.
OT proto stuff once they reach a certain scale will have to think about like the implicit thing that itch.io is having to do and Blue Sky is also having to do is get all of the adult related content off of your platform. What the fuck does that mean? Okay, that's a hard problem. But then the other part is, practically speaking, how do you do that? And like that implies, if you're able to do that, that you have a way to filter adult-ish content, and then a whole bunch of stuff gets scooped up in that. And who gets to define that? Is that being defined by the companies? Is that being defined by the pressure campaigns? And what additional agendas do those pressure campaigns have? Because it's not simply I don't want my kids to see porn. Oftentimes, those can be things like I don't want my kids to see anything that is related to LGBTQ issues, and like, you know, that's certainly one of the manifestations in the U.S. currently with the like huge upwelling of anti-trans policymaking and rhetoric at the moment. And what does that mean for distributed platforms like Blue Sky, right? Like the funky part about Blue Sky is the fact that it is a distributed architecture, but actually the majority of the way that people interact with it is functionally centralized. And there needs to be a lot of work to be done in order to um, better distribute the points of leverage and pressure, which I don't know how you're going to get around payment processors, but also just operating within particular jurisdictions is, I think, one of the really hard parts. And to be clear,
Yeah.
you can't do that in. You can use systems that aren't as large as Blue Sky to circumvent some of the age restrictions in the UK, and there are other ways to go about doing that too.
Yeah, there'll always be ways to get around it.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that one of the challenges there is, like that is a good reason why people are excited about decentralized systems is the ability to sort of be like, oh, actually, like I don't want to be, subject to this particular jurisdiction's rules. But also, I think, one of the things, that sort of I think is happening in the itch context that I think folks don't necessarily appreciate is the fact that there is a negotiation at all is a sign of itch's actual power as like in terms of the amount of payments it's processing, right? Because if itch was just like some teeny person's website, right, then they just get kicked off. I mean, they wouldn't even be in a conversation with Visa or MasterCard. They just get kicked off their payment processor, and then they just can't get a new payment processor, and that's the end of that, right? Like,
Wait, would practically speaking though, would they, or are they flying under the radar if they're small enough because what happened to Itch was the result of activist pressure?
so it depends, right? Is part of
Yeah.
the is I mean, you had a lawyer on, so like at some point I
Yeah.
have to say it depends. It's
Yeah,
like a
no.
requirement, right? So I mean, I think, yes, part of it is absolutely in this case it is activist pressure, but the reality is that like if you're like a small website, you use a sort of individual payment card processor or because you are using a processor, right? Like they don't have to keep you on and they can just decide that they don't like
Yeah,
you,
it's
right?
arbitrary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, it is true that like to the extent that like then you are not necessarily going to be inherently a target the same way itch and steam were, but you aren't necessarily going to be in a position where that gives you any safety if someone chooses that they
Right.
do want you off the platform, or if the payment card processor just doesn't want to deal with you, which definitely happens, right? um so I think, you know I think that the challenge there of, decentralization is, yes, you can get around some of these kind of mandates or find ways to circumvent them, but also, you know, some of your ability to even negotiate comes from just sheer kind of your centralization of power or your,
Right,
and
right.
like if you don't have that, then maybe, in certain circumstances you're worse off, even if you have fewer things that you have to comply with.
Yeah. This is one of the things I
Yeah.
think is super interesting about talking about this in the context of decentralized networks and also like Blue Sky's legibility, because of the fact that like people within the decentralized ecosystem are like, oh, Blue Sky's a really big thing, but like it's 35 million signups, maybe like 40, I think at this point. And in the grand scope of things, that's just not very big. And
Mhm.
so like there's a market power within the scope of like what the AT proto network is structured as, but then there's just a
Yeah.
global market power question here and the types of organizations that you're going to be interacting with, which is
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, the Blue Sky post about rolling out age verification, I just looked at it because I knew we were going to talk about it a little bit. And it is, you know, what I would consider to be, we're so excited to work with the UK government would be perhaps my short characterization, right? And, I obviously I don't know what the conversations were that led to that being the frame. I think there's probably lots of folks who are in the AT Proto ecosystem where like that is not the frame they would bring to that having to roll out that tooling, right? Um, and one could speculate that it's a result of exactly what you were saying, Ted, which is like the comparatively small sort of power of Blue Sky as a platform to sort of stand up and say to the UK and say like, well, like no, we think this is wrong and we don't want to do it, or decision not to sort of raise those hackles, right? I honestly don't have a good sense of exactly kind of what the strategic thinking has been in that space, but I think it is interesting to see uh, you know, different organizations respond really differently to those sorts of things. And like Blue Sky's post about it was very much like, we're so excited to protect children, which I think is not how users on Blue Sky have necessarily responded to it, is what I
yeah,
would say.
yeah, yeah, and I mean Blue Sky's reputation around how it curates and moderates its platform, I think, has been complicated. We'll put it as complicated. So, yeah, I guess in keeping with that degree of complication.
I mean, like we had an example of this on the other end, right? I can't remember which South American country Twitter stopped. Was it
Brazil.
Brazil? Twitter stopped
Brazil.
operating Brazil, and it was mainly because they wouldn't
To be
name
clear,
or
they did
appoint a
not stop
certain officer.
operating. They were disconnected
They
from
were. Oh
Brazil.
yes, yes, yes. No, and that's one
So
of the reasons why I like this, because this is the equivalent of the we are the people with more guns, and the people with more guns are going to just turn this off.
I also think in this case, and I'm not usually a stickler for this, it's probably worth noting that that was X and not Twitter, right? Like the pure
Yes,
at the
yes.
time, because there
It's the
are
corporate entity.
examples. Yeah, like, well, more I'm saying like it was under Elon Musk, right? Because there
Yeah,
are examples of companies pulling out of markets because they don't want to comply with particular regulatory things because they think they're bad for users, right? Like you could
right.
go all the way back to like the 90s and Yahoo and China. I think it was the 90s. Anyway, but like that's not what happened there, right? As Ted was saying, right, like Brazil basically said, like, you're not complying with a court order, we're going to shut off access. The other thing that sort of often the more guns phenomenon has is this like hostage take, whether they're sometimes called hostage taking laws, which is just this idea that like uh, countries will require that a company have an executive that is
Yes,
in
right.
country, so that they have someone to arrest if the company does not comply with particular regulatory mandates.
Yeah.
And I hope those folks get paid a lot of money, is all I'll say about that.
Yeah, and there's a number of countries that do that, right? So Brazil's one, India's now one, and there's a couple of other ones. And the complicated part about that is that the way that those countries use social media has changed dramatically over the past 10 years. That I mean that both in terms of the way that their citizens use those platforms, but also the way that those governments use platforms and the way that political campaigns use it. And they have become much more a space where governments have power, as opposed to spaces that were held up in, I'm not going to say opposition, but
or
as a
are
counterweight
willing
to
to
government power.
exercise that power
Yeah,
Yeah.
um,
that's right.
in support of a policy aim,
Yeah, and
right?
so social platforms that come up now are operating in a very different type of environment than like Twitter in 2009, right? I mean, and just to Kendra's earlier point, like Twitter had a particularly robust policy team that stood on a variety of things that they saw as user rights, and
Right.
the environment in the ecosystem has changed. And so, like, it's interesting to see Blue Sky basically say we have a set of rights and values that we think are important, but the operational environment that they're set up in and their scale and
Yeah.
size means that they have to comply in certain types of ways, and like it or not, put out messages like they have, that you could say maybe contravene some of the things that they talk about, as values that they hold. But I think again, the landscape is complicated and much more challenging than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
But at the extreme end, this is the pragmatic political negotiation between a multinational company, right, and a sovereign nation state. This is, we're seeing this right now with the UK iMessage backdoor, right, in encryption, where Apple has made the decision with the UK to say, well, it's the UK, we're going to call your bluff,
Yeah.
right? And if you're actually going to do it, you're going to do it. I can't remember what happened in Australia, because Australia had something equivalent where they need to provide the technical means or something like that to be able to circumvent encryption, and that law did get passed, but no one has used it, well, that we know of. Yeah. I don't know.
Not my area of
But then
expertise.
and then you right, but then you've got Canada playing chicken with Facebook, right, over news,
Well,
and
Australia did
then
as well first.
yeah, right,
And
And,
that's
and
and
actually the
then
France
example I was
did.
going to bring up.
yeah,
I,
yeah, and
and
and there, I mean, we just see that we see the limit of sovereign power there against the multinational.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in Canada's case, well, so Australia first did this, which basically they said, Google and I think Facebook, you need to pay, you need to, basically this was an effort in Australia by Rupert Murdoch to extract a whole bunch of money out of Google and Facebook,
Right,
and they
right,
succeeded in Australia. And Canada
yeah,
went, that sounds like a great idea, let's do that too. And
right,
and then Facebook said,
And they didn't
Canada,
have Rupert Murdoch, and Facebook,
right, right,
right, Canada, Facebook basically said, Canada, you are the size of California, please buzz off.
yeah,
And
don't care.
what's happened in Canada is that you cannot link to news articles on Facebook, and so instead, the information ecosystem of Facebook is entirely bullshit, and that has not been good for the Canadian news ecosystem or information ecosystem, generally speaking, and again comes to that market power framing ultimately.
But then so then if Facebook were talking about this in terms of user rights, and then they were really really digging their heels in, right, then I think you get to the situation where, and I have no idea if this has actually happened, where a company is compelled to provide service, is legally compelled to provide service in the jurisdiction, where Canada would go back and say, right, if you're not, then you still have to, otherwise no Facebook at all, like
Yeah, that would be the escalation, right? But think about the
right,
I mean,
steps there, right?
that's in some ways what
yeah,
happened with X,
that's what
right?
happened with
Like,
X, yeah,
yeah,
But shutting off
it's
Facebook, I
just
think, is
like,
a much bigger deal, and not a thing that you
yeah,
could get away with for your population. But I mean, other places have done that, right? Like China literally does do that.
right, and then Apple makes the commercial decision there to say, all right, fine, we'll run our cloud infrastructure there.
Right.
You
yeah,
can have servers as hostage then.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think like part of it is I I think that it sucks, it's just to name the obvious for users that it's sort of like, the two sources of power that are meaningfully like sort of regulating things are, governments that may be engaged in like profoundly authoritarian anti-use what I would call anti-user behavior, and then like companies that are more interested, that are fundamentally sometimes pro-user if it helps them and their bottom line, and sometimes just like, are making that call based on other stuff, right? And I think that it's hard, in environments, even ones that are relatively, where there's some amount of decentralization, it's hard when people functionally don't find it viable or don't want to run their own infrastructure, right? To like be in a circumstance in which you're like, yes, my two options are large company that I know doesn't have my, like these two options that don't, neither of which have my best interests at heart or align with my values, right? And like that, I think, it leads to some interesting, I don't want to call it flip-flopping because I don't think it's necessarily even like non-values consistent, but sort of ping-ponging back and forth on like these different kind of fights between, you know, countries and companies, right? Like I like it when Apple, says to the UK, "Well, buzz off with your
Right.
encryption
Yeah.
backdoor stuff," and I don't like it when,
They were going to roll out their CSAM filtering technology, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or like Facebook, says, "Well, no news links for you in Canada," right? And
Yeah.
that's the like, that is, it's not. I think folks always, there's some desire for sort of external, consistent position, and I think the reality can be like, hey, actually, like I don't like either of these options, and that means I'm going to find myself in the middle or going back and forth depending on the subject that the power is being exercised in favor of.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
and I think what that falls down to is like, um, does a government have the policy of public universal service critical infrastructure, like we saw with telecoms, like we saw with state-owned, like we see with the postal service, right? It's like, yeah, you can use whoever you want, but when it comes down to it, the government will assure that you can communicate from one point to another point. And at the very least, you have that level to fall back on, and then you know that that level is legislative or whichever.
Which is sort of an interesting, like brings us back to the HIO thing, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
did
like the
it.
point. Yeah. Well, because the point is that there are no alternatives to Visa or MasterCard, at least for
Exactly.
the primarily for US users. My understanding, and I'm not an expert in this, is that in like many European countries, the default is not credit card payments, right? There are other basically there's a banking system that does not require functionally credit card companies to be
Yes.
the
Yep.
intermediary. And
Yes.
that means that it is actually plausible that, if there was actually robust, back end infrastructure that you could fall back on, like it isn't maybe that the farm behavior to sort of say, well, Visa and MasterCard go take a hike. We're keeping our NSFW content on the site. If there's actually infrastructure you can fall back on for handling payments. If there's not, then you get the situation where these multinational companies have control over the speech.
Yeah.
It is interesting because governments that, oh God, I could go on forever. Like governments have provided decentralized, fallback mechanisms because then, like that's cash.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and the place I was going to go with this is all of this ends up being a coordination problem ultimately, and who has done a better job doing the coordination already and has the incumbency and the ability to the sort of like service integration thing, which is where like DIY as a solution to some of these things is hard and I think a serious challenge and a serious impediment to decentralization as a solution to some of these other problems that people want decentralized networks to solve. So,
Yeah.
Thank you, Kendra, for coming on and talking bullshit with us for a while and how
Telling you
hard things
all
are.
about porn. Yeah, that's
Yeah, we
my
got the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's actually really interesting to sort of watch this play out with Itch because the sort of population of people affected is very different than I think has been historically the case in porn. And like, a lot of same thing actually with Blue Sky, right? Age verification for porn sites is the basically the law in like a large number of states in the United States currently. And that those processes have already happened. And I think there's definitely an amount of I told you so that sex worker advocates are doing very reasonably. But I also think part of it is like, okay, like this is a bunch of people who care about this issue. How do you mobilize them to do things and work on, and like sort of push on it, if even if they're just waking up to the fact that it was an issue before? So it'll be interesting to see sort of how that plays out in the context of something like itch, where you have a large crossover with, and to some extent Steam, although I think Steam is a different problem. You have a large crossover with people who weren't necessarily affected by earlier
Yeah.
payment card system usage of the content restrictions. So, but cool. Well, thanks for having me, y'all.
Yep, we have a user question, which is listener question. Viewer question? Viewer question. Sorry, still working on the terminology. The Google Doc that you posted is something that is already publicly available and everybody can share, right? Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. No,
well,
it's
thank you for that. And we should post about that. I do actually think like everybody agrees that this is actually a meaningful resource that people should probably be talking about in the context of these conversations. So thanks.
Cool.
Worthy
All right,
challenger.
Take care, y'all.
Yeah. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
we all win. No one was defeated. That's the answer. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Rock on. That was great.
That was fun. Yeah, we're like 2 for 2 for interesting guests.
Yeah. Okay, let me recompose the OBS layout here and open things up. What else we got, Dan? I feel actually substantially more edified. I always enjoyed talking with Kendra, but also definitely learned things and got some resources out of that. So that was a lot of
fun. The internet is too big to not be splintered anymore.
Yeah. Our expectations have changed in a bunch of ways. And I think some of that is like really good. And some of that is not very good.
Yeah. And, it is this will be an acceleration of people trying to adopt and develop technical means to circumvent regulation.
Yeah.
It's just happening more and more.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about the decentralization isn't going to save you problem. It's maybe the way that I'll phrase it, which is like when the Ofcom regs were announced, the reaction from people who were running small or indie communities were basically like, I got to shut my community down. There's no way I can comply with these regulations. And I think that that's a real problem, right? Like one of the examples that I saw was a fixed gear bicycle community in the UK. That was just like,
are you talking about
age
Are you talking about age verification in particular, or because I remember there was another set that came out where there was a very fuzzy area where it's like, but if you're not too big, then you're okay. You don't have to do it.
I thought it was the age restrictions, but let me double check.
There was a whole thing where it's like, wait, so I operate a WordPress site and then people can comment on it, and is that going to be okay? Like, am I still covered under that?
Which I should maybe check back in on where this ended up.
Maybe it was just part of the Online Safety Act.
Yeah, it was Online Safety Act, and I can toss you the link for that if you would like. But I don't know where it ended up landing. But I know that was the concern. Maybe they did find a way to make it work. There's still posts, but it seems like
I do. Yeah, I need to find it, but I do remember.
Most recent post 7 minutes ago.
Yeah, because like for example, I think Charlie Stross posted about it. He was like, "Does this cover me?"
Yeah,
like people can leave comments on my website. Am I? Yeah, there's there's like are you a smaller service or a larger service?
Yeah. And what are your obligations throughout which pieces of that? I think is a real challenge.
Yeah. So there's a table here that I will put in our chat. Yeah, and it's like it's always going to be one of those things, which means that lawyers will have work to do forever. Which is there's always going to be that gray area of like it depends, kind of.
Yeah. Kendra also sends along the ACLU effort with the FTC, which I didn't realize was that recent either. Also sends to
Yeah, so Ofcom divides into for user to user services, search services. A large one is an average user base. So let's just say that as an MAU of greater than, so 7 million MAU. And the smaller service is everything that's not that,
yeah,
which includes micro businesses, right? And then there's the provider makes an assessment about the kind of risk, which is again, I think it would have been when I remember, and this was when I was a baby lawyer, right? It was like when every website thought that they needed to consult
yeah,
with lawyers about what should our privacy policy be, like what are our obligations around that, and what do we need to publish and what do we need to do, and then suddenly every law firm was like, oh, come in here and have like a website clinic with us about what's going to happen with your, and you're like, I run a WordPress site.
yeah,
um
yeah.
But I mean, like my answer to this is always going to be, well, it's always going to be political. So, which I do think comes back down to, okay, well, how does decentralization help people organize political power?
Yeah. You told me that you had a hard stop. So
I
my question
did.
for you
I
is
did. I do have a hard stop.
whether we need to call it um, and say thank you to
Uh,
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
This has been
Uh,
fun. This has been great.
yeah. Lots of interesting things. Thank you, Unhinged Posts, for uh, reposting that. And we will see you probably next week.
Yeah.
Trying to make a habit of it and keep going. So thanks, everybody. And we will see you all soon.